Wow, can you believe that E-MTB is 6 months old and we've not yet done a basic e-bike maintenance video? And I have to thank Hayley from the White Horse for highlighting this. So today we're going to be covering all the parts that you need to keep an eye on to keep your e-bike running sweetly. Your relationship with your e-bike simply is not going to function if you do not invest a significant amount of time when it comes to maintenance. Yes, it can be dirty as long as it's tight and it's well lubed. Remember to have some humility when it comes to maintaining your e-bike. Admit that you're going to make mistakes along the way, but you simply have to learn as you go along. Now, a lot of people really panic that it's all about the battery and the motor when it comes to e-bike maintenance, but in our experience, we find that's simply not the case. There's loads of other parts on the bike that will probably go wrong before the battery and the motor. So in this video, we're going to concentrate on some of the parts you need to keep an eye on to keep everything running smoothly. So obviously you keep your bike in quite a clean condition. You don't need to go over the top, particularly in the summer months. Now, number one on the list has to be the chain when it comes to maintenance, because it is simply the only connection between the motor and your rear tyre. So what do you need to do? Well, it comes down to lube, simple as that. You can get dry lube or wet lube. Now, I tend to use wet lube. You need to use it more often than dry lube because dry lube tends to stick to the chain a lot more, but it keeps everything a little bit cleaner. You need to be doing that at least every ride on your e-bike. Now, the second part of chain maintenance comes down to checking whether your chain is stretched or not, because on an e-bike there's probably double the amount of torque going through that chain as on a conventional bike, and it's very easy. You simply buy a chain checker. They're about £17 for a pro version like this Park, or they go down to about £3.50. Now, the key thing is replacing your chain more often is going to be cheaper than replacing such things as cassettes and gears and sprockets on your bike. So very simply, all you do is drop the 2 pins onto your chain and adjust the black marker dial as you do. And as you can see, I clearly need a new chain on this bike. This is 6 months old and she's rotten. Okay, number 2, tyre pressures. Is there actually a video where I do not talk about tyres and tyre pressures on E-MTB? I'm not sure there is. So why is it important? Well, if your tyres are too soft, then that's going to mean there's quite a drain on the battery on your e-bike, and also it's going to be quite unsettling in corners. So keep an eye on them. I mean, I weigh about 90 kilos and I generally run about 25 PSI front and rear. If you've got too much air in your tyres, there's going to obviously be less strain on your battery, but when it comes to going off-road, you're simply not going to have that bite when it comes to going uphill, and the bike's going to be quite difficult to handle when you get to off-road conditions. Now, there's also the tread to think about on your e-bike tyres, as well as the pressure, and that's for 2 reasons. Because good sharp tyres mean there's going to be good grip when it comes to climbing, and they're also going to be more efficient when it comes to braking. Now, a worn out ball tyre is pretty good for tarmac, but that's about it. Right, nuts and bolts, it sounds so obvious, and because it really pretty much is that. All you need is a set of Allen keys, that is it. So who are the main culprits when it comes to nuts and bolts coming loose? Well, derailleur has to be route 1 when it comes to making sure that's tight. Also, moving further forward in the bike, the chainring bolts and the crankset, keep an eye on them. All your suspension linkages, all the nuts and bolts on that, keep an eye on those too. And the headset, I think because the added weight on an e-bike and all those collisions you're going through, that tends to work loose quite often. So what I also tend to do is at least every other ride, I go through every single nut and bolt on my e-bike. It's pretty simple to do, it takes about 10 minutes, so keep an eye on them. Now, if your headset is loose, you will recognize this because there'll be a little knocking coming from the front of your bike, and it's a really easy thing to fix. So up front, you simply loosen the stem bolts. There's 2 of them on most stems. So that takes a couple, maybe like you need to go 2 turns, and then so you loosen them. And so then you go to the top cap, which is found on the top of the stem, and you simply tighten that down, not too much, and you rock the bike back and forth until there's no play there. Do not over tighten that top bolt because it'll wear your headset out and it'll make your steering absolutely hideous. Now, if you've got an e-bike where you simply charge the battery on the bike, then most of the time you can leave it well alone. However, if you're taking your battery out of your e-bike quite regularly, then it is worth checking, particularly the lead that connects the motor to the battery, and make sure that there's no grit got in those contact points there. Now, we've actually done a video just about e-bike battery fundamentals, and you can find this just here. It gives you everything you need to know about battery care and maintenance. Right, let's talk about suspension on e-bikes. Now, most e-bikes today come with air suspension front and rear. Now, when it comes to actually setting up suspension, there's a ton of videos out there, both on GMBN and E-MTB, on exactly how to do that. And basically what you need to familiarize yourself with sag. So that's the amount of suspension compressors front and rear when you're sat on it. But you don't need to go into those details because it should have been set up when you bought the bike, or at least you should have set it up when you had the bike. Because what we're covering here is making sure you maintain those settings on the bike. And it's important you do this because if your suspension goes too soft, that means it's going to really unbalance the bike and it's going to be quite unstable riding your e-bike, which is not a really good experience. It's going to actually be quite tiring. At the other end of the spectrum, if your suspension is too hard, then that's going to mean there's going to be not so much grip on your e-bike, and also you're going to be getting quite a hard ride through the handlebars and the back wheel. Do you know what? There's nothing better than a set of gears that's working crisply, sweetly, and is generally well aligned. At the same time, there's probably nothing more frustrating. The gears that jump from one to another, make a noise and rattle, the derailleur's bent. Now, the reason why it's important you keep on top of gear maintenance is because the motor relies on the gears working precisely for it to function correctly. Now, if you want to get into a basics on how to set up your gears, we've done a very easy one, which you can find just up here. And finally, brake pads. Now, you really do not want to have a runaway truck in your hand, and it's quite easy to identify if your brakes are worn out or not because you'll have that metal to metal feeling and quite a racket, but you don't want to let it go that far. And it's a really easy thing to identify because if you look down on your disc, you should see 3 bits of metal. You'll have the disc in the middle, you'll have the brake pad holders on the outside, and then in between that, you'll actually have the pad itself. Now, if those bits of metal are close together, there's a good chance that your pads are worn out. However, if those 3 bits of metal are quite widely spread apart, then that means that your pads should be in good condition. Replacing brake pads is a really simple job. All it requires you take your wheel out. Alternatively, take it down your shop. They shouldn't actually charge you to fit a new set of brake pads, especially if you buy them. Pretty much like Haley wouldn't charge you for topping up a pint of beer in the bar at the White Horse. Now, that's about it. Brake pad wear, it pretty much depends on where you live. If you live in a sandy area, you're going to get a higher wear. Also, if you ride a lot of trail centres, you'll find you're going to be replacing your brake pads a lot more often when it comes to that. There you go, that's it. That's our basic e-bike maintenance. Sorry it's taken so long to come up with it. If you want to see more videos, there's a battery fundamentals you find down here, and a motor fundamentals, which explains everything about all the different types of e-bike motor. Any questions, let me know on the comments below. I'm sure there'll be a ton of them. I'm not sure I can answer all of them, but I'll give it my best shot. Make sure you get down the White Horse for a pint and a pie, and that's about it. Don't forget to subscribe if you've not already done so.